Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Our mission, as always, is taking this pile of research and pulling out the key insights for you, turning complex stuff into something, well, hopefully compelling.
And today, yeah, we're really focusing in on New York City's future. There's this kind of political earthquake happening, shaking up the city's democratic establishment.
Definitely. We're diving deep into Zohran Mamdani. He's this rising political figure, and he's completely unapologetic about running on a socialist platform.
Right.
We're not just looking at slogans here. We're digging into his actual platform, thinking about how his progressive socialist ideas, you can really see the influence of the DSA movement. Figures like AOC, how they could, fundamentally change the Big Apple. We've got sources on his policies, the data he uses, and frankly, the huge political and financial challenges he's up against.
And it couldn't be more timely, really. New York City feels like it's at a tipping point. The current mayor, Eric Adams, well, let's just say he's staggering. Scandals, really low approval ratings.
Yeah, I saw that Siena College poll.
Yeah.
Below 30%.
That's right. It is. And it feels like the old ways just aren't working. The city seems ready, maybe even desperate, for a pretty radical change.
So let's start with Mamdani himself, because his background is pretty unique, isn't it?
Absolutely fascinating. Born in Uganda in 1991. His parents were Indian immigrants. He grew up in Queens.
And he wasn't always in politics, right? He had this whole other life first.
Yeah, a pretty successful one in hip-hop and music production, then made this, dramatic shift into electoral politics.
It feels like more than just a shift, though. It was almost a statement. His 2020 win for State Assembly in District 36, people called it a terremoto, an earthquake.
Because he beat a longtime Democratic incumbent. And crucially, he had the backing of the Democratic Socialists of America, the DSA.
Can you just quickly explain, for listeners maybe not as familiar, how important is that DSA connection?
Oh, it's central. They're his organizing backbone. It means he's not just one guy with progressive ideas. He's part of this, coordinated movement. They provide the people, the structure.
And it wasn't just a one-off win either.
No, definitely not. He got reelected in 2024 with, 70% of the vote? Something like that. So he's cemented himself as a really serious contender for mayor in 2025 or maybe, soon after.
Okay, so why now? Why is New York City, which we always think of as liberal but maybe not socialist, suddenly seeming so open to this message?
Well, look at the city post-pandemic. It's not just inequality. It's rampant inequality, a really brutal cost of living crisis that's pushing people out, essential workers, families.
I saw that Columbia University stat you mentioned in the research, 40% of New Yorkers at risk of eviction.
40%. It's hard to even grasp.
How do you hear that number if you live there and not think something drastic needs to change? It's staggering.
Exactly. And that brings us right to the first pillar of Mamdani's platform, housing as a human right.
Which sounds good, but what does it mean in practice?
The big, audacious goal, build 100,000 public housing units in a decade.
Wow. Okay, 100,000 units.
Yeah.
How does he propose paying for that? That's a massive project.
The plan is through levies, specific taxes aimed right at the big real estate corporations. And what's interesting, he's not just pulling this out of thin air. He points to economic modeling, like a 2022 Rand Corporation study.
What did that show?
It looked at cities like Vienna with strong social housing and found those policies cut poverty by 15%. So he's making that link.
Okay, connecting it to real-world anti-poverty results. But has he actually gotten anything done in Albany that suggests he can translate these big ideas into law?
Well, the most direct example is the Good Cause Eviction Law from 2024. He co-authored that.
Remind us what that does.
Basically, it means landlords need a legitimate reason not to renew a lease. It offers protection against arbitrary rent hikes or just being kicked out for no reason. And estimates say it's protected something like 200,000 tenants.
So some track record of coalition building getting structural reform passed.
Okay. It shows he can navigate the legislative process, at least.
So housing is the emergency. Where does climate justice fit into this? Is that like a separate issue or connected?
For him, it's completely intertwined. Pillar 2 is pushing for a Green New Deal, but specifically tailored for the boroughs.
Meaning?
The immediate goal is electrifying 50% of public transit by 2030. But look, it's fundamentally about equity, too.
How so?
Think about those IPCC findings from 2023. Heat waves hit communities of color hardest, right?
Yeah.
Especially in places like the Bronx and Queens, less green space, less AC.
Right, the urban heat island effect.
Exactly. So electrifying buses, investing in that public infrastructure, he frames it as a health issue, a fairness issue for those communities.
That really does reframe it. And the third pillar, economy and wages.
Yeah, this is maybe the most direct economic intervention, raising the minimum wage to $25 an hour, and universal childcare.
$25 an hour, wow. And universal child care, the argument there is
Stabilizing the workforce, basically. There's an Economic Policy Institute analysis from 2024 suggesting this could actually boost local GDP by
Yes.
2.5% a year.
Okay, but the immediate pushback is always inflation, right? And crushing small businesses with that kind of wage hike.
Of course. And the counter, based on that EPI data, is that you'd get this huge surge in consumer spending. Plus, think of the productivity gains when parents have reliable, free childcare. The argument is that offsets the costs, leading to growth, not collapse.
Let's go back to his backstory for a second. You mentioned Bowdoin University, studying Marx and Audre Lorde, founding that political hip-hop group.
Yeah, he was quite successful, too. Had a track, Nani, about anti-imperialism, got millions of streams.
So how does going from, viral artist to state assemblyman change how he does politics?
It makes him a really skilled communicator. He can take these complex ideas, Marxist theory or whatever, and make them catchy, compelling. He uses performance, narrative.
And the DSA provides the
Boots on the ground, yeah. They've grown massively, maybe 100,000 members now, according to some estimates. They provide the organizing power, but he's often the voice, the face.
And he's used that platform already in Albany, hasn't he?
Right.
Pushing for big things like the NY Health Act.
Definitely. That's essentially a statewide to be care for all bill. Yeah. He really focuses on justice issues, always trying to connect policy to, social friction on the ground.
Like the stop and frisk protests.
Exactly. He led protests, and he'd cite the data ACLU studies from 2023, linking those policies directly to increased racial tension. He consistently uses data to back up the activism.
Okay, but let's talk money again. Because this vision, universal childcare, 100K housing units, Green New Deal, it costs a fortune. Beyond real estate taxes, what's the plan?
He talks about this thing called the NYC Solidarity Fund. The idea is to redistribute profits from major corporations by taxing companies that currently manage to avoid paying much locally.
Like, who are we talking about?
Well, ProPublica had that report in 2024 about Amazon, right? Paying basically zero in local taxes despite their huge footprint. Mamdani wants to capture some of that value for public projects, community cooperatives.
It sounds radical, but is it totally unprecedented in New York?
Not entirely. He draws inspiration from history. Think about Roosevelt's WPA building things like the Lincoln Tunnel, or even the strong rent control the city had back in the 70s. There are precedents for large-scale public intervention.
Okay, here's the friction point, though, the standard critique. This sounds nice in a university seminar, but it'll kill the golden goose. Wall Street will say, Stockholm isn't New York, and that hiking taxes sends capital flying to Florida.
And that's the #1 fear he absolutely has to address. It's a real risk. But there is international data that pushes back on that automatic assumption.
Such as?
A Harvard Kennedy School paper from 2024 looked specifically at social democratic cities. Stockholm, for instance. It found policies similar to Mamdani's reduced the income gap by 25% without hurting overall economic growth.
So the pie doesn't shrink, it just gets shared more evenly. Is that the idea?
That's the argument, yeah. And you can point to IMF data, too, from 2023. Sweden maintains pretty solid growth, like 2.8% annually, even with a massive welfare system.
So the idea that a strong safety net automatically tanks capitalism, the evidence is more mixed than critics suggest.
Exactly. And that's the data Mamdani uses to counter those attacks on his financial plans.
All right, let's pivot to the challenges. Because they are, frankly, enormous. The biggest, most obvious one, Wall Street itself. New York City runs on that tax base.
It's the central unavoidable risk. That proposed 2% extra tax on the ultra-rich. It could trigger capital flight. We've seen reports, Wall Street Journal in 2024, about firms like Goldman Sachs already looking at places like Florida, Texas.
So he's betting the improved quality of life from his policies will be enough to keep them.
Or enough to offset the losses. It's a huge gamble. And you can bet the financial sector will fight back tooth and nail.
And it's not just Republicans he'd be fighting. The internal Democratic Party politics are brutal.
Oh, absolutely. He'd likely face serious heavyweights in a primary. Think Scott Stringer, maybe even Cuomo trying a comeback. The establishment wing sees the DSA as a direct threat to their power, their funding.
Then there's the identity politics angle, especially in a city like New York. His stance on Israel and Palestine, criticizing Israel at the UN in 2024. That could alienate a lot of moderate Jewish voters, important donors.
That's a very real concern, particularly with established donor networks, yes. But the ground might be shifting there, too.
How so?
Look at Pew surveys from 2025. They showed something like 60% of Jewish millennials actually support public criticism of Netanyahu's government. So while he risks losing older, more established support, he might be tapping into a younger, more progressive base that wants that policy shift.
It's a complex calculation.
Right.
Okay, beyond the money and the politics, just getting things done, execution. Socialism might sound great, but City Hall is famous for being this bureaucratic maze that just swallows ambitious plans whole.
That's the practical day-to-day nightmare, isn't it? Take the 100,000 housing units, fantastic goal. But you have to overcome the history of NYCHA, the Public Housing Authority, corruption, mismanagement. The Inspector General's 2024 report laid it all bare.
So the delivery has to be as good as the idea, or the whole thing falls apart.
Precisely. The ambition has to be matched by competence in execution, which is incredibly hard at that scale.
It seems like he's navigating this weird space between, like, viral memes and serious structural reform proposals.
Yeah, he has to fight the cultural battle, too. You see those communism and pizza slices memes on social media, right?
Aye.
The attempts to paint him as this scary radical.
How does he counter that?
Often with humor and clarity. He had that viral quote, "Socialism means free bagels for all," trying to make these potentially intimidating ideas feel, well, maybe less threatening, more approachable, even funny.
So, wrapping this up, Mamdani feels like more than just another candidate. He's trying to bridge these two New Yorks, the shiny skyscraper city and the city of damp basements, as the research put it, giving voice to that 40% facing eviction risk.
Yeah, his whole story, immigrant kid, artist, now legislator, kind of embodies the city's complicated promise, doesn't it? And those Urban Institute projections for 2025, they suggest his agenda, if implemented, could genuinely lift quality of life for marginalized groups by about 18%. That's significant.
It really feels like a rejection of the status quo, a demand for real economic equity. The message seems to be, maybe the city doesn't need another millionaire mayor. Maybe it needs a poet warrior, as one source called him.
And here's a final thought to maybe chew on. If he actually pulls this off, if you get this thriving, more socialist NYC with universal childcare, stable housing, what happens next? Could certain global businesses, maybe ones not in finance, actually find that kind of city more attractive?
Because of the stable workforce.
The benefits.
Exactly. A highly stable, educated workforce that isn't constantly churning because of housing costs or lack of childcare. Could that create a different, maybe even more durable kind of economic engine for the city beyond Wall Street? An interesting question. Does solving the social problems create new economic opportunities? Something for all of us, especially New Yorkers, to think about as the next election cycle approaches.
Definitely food for thought.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.